I want to thank the Majority Leader for moving to proceed to the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. He made that motion Tuesday afternoon. Now, my hope is it's not going to be necessary to have extended debate or a filibuster or the filing of a cloture petition or delay of several days and then delay 2 more days, even after more than 60 votes, to bring the debate to a close and proceed toward a bill and another vote in the motion to proceed before the Senate is permitted to consider this important measure. I expect, Madam President, anybody listening got lost to that whole train, and that's something we senators should think about. American public expects us to vote yes or no, and not maybe. And the longer the delaying motions go on, you're voting maybe. Let's vote yes or no. For almost 18 years, the Violence Against Women Act has been the centerpiece of the federal government's commitment to combat domestic violence and dating violence and sexual assault and stalking. The impact of this landmark law has been remarkable. It's provided life-saving assistance to hundreds of thousands of women and children and men. And I appreciate the fact this has had bipartisan support from the beginning. Senator Crapo and I introduced the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act last year after months of discussion. We wanted it to be a bipartisan bill, and it is. Now, too often of recent times, the Senate goes through all kinds of delaying moves before they proceed to legislation. Again, as I said, American people elect us, expect us to vote yes or no, and not maybe. The delays are big, fat maybe. But the Violence Against Women Act is a measure that's co-sponsored by 61 senators, sponsored by Democrats and Republicans and independents, passed out of the Senate Judiciary Committee in February. So I hope that now Democrats and Republicans and independents will come together to proceed to consider the bill without delay. And I would hope they step forward, do the right thing, send the message to America: we want the Violence Against Women Act reauthorized. It's an opportunity for the Senate to come together and renew what I believe is a shared commitment among senators to end violence against women. For generations, violence against women in this country was condoned. Too often these insidious crimes were dismissed with a joke or a shrug or that involves somebody else. Rape was too often excused. Domestic violence was tolerated as a family matter. Victims were blamed and humiliated and ignored. They had nowhere to turn. There were no crisis centers. There were no shelters. Far too many women and families were left to fend just for themselves with no help. But the Violence Against Women Act, 18 years ago, has helped to change that. It sent a powerful message that violence against women is a crime, and it's not going to be tolerated no matter where it happens. It transformed the law enforcement response. It provided services to victims all across the country. Now, Madam President, is the time to renew our commitment to these victims by passing this legislation. We need to move forward. We have to reaffirm that ending violence against women is a priority for all Americans. We need to be a beacon to others around the world in this regard. With this effort, we set the standard. We show that America understands equality, recognizes human dignity. We're going to fight injustice against the most vulnerable among us. Legislation I introduced with Senator Crapo is drawn from the needs of survivors of domestic and sexual violence. It's based on the recommendations we got from professionals who worked so hard on this. It includes improvements suggested by law enforcement officers across the country. As we build on the progress we made in reducing domestic and sexual violence, we make vital improvements responding to remaining unmet needs to better serve the victims of violence. We incorporate the important work that Chairman Akaka and Senator Murkowski and the Senate Indian Affairs Committee have been doing to try to respond to the epidemic of domestic and sexual violence in tribal communities. We increased the focus on effective response to sexual assault. Now, the incidence of domestic violence has fallen since VAWA was first introduced by more than 50%. The progress is not yet translated to reducing sexual assault. Incidence of sexual assault remains high, while reporting rates and prosecution rates and conviction rates remain appallingly low. So we face that problem head on. We ensure that funds are allocated to law enforcement and victim service responses to sexual assault. It authorizes support for law enforcement sexual assault training and the reduction of the backlogs of untested rape kits. You know, in a lot of places, they say, well, we can't test this rape kit for several months. So oftentimes we find the person who did this may come back. So during those several months, they say to the victim, be sure and keep your door locked. Boy, that's a great consolation, isn't it? Instead of being able to say, we can test this immediately and we can go get the person involved. You know, my early experience with questions of sexual assault was not as a senator, but as a local prosecutor. And Senator Crapo has been visiting women's shelters and working on these issues for decades as well. His principled bipartisanship should be respected, should be celebrated as being in the best tradition of the Senate I came to 37 years ago. At the outset, we've consulted to make this bill the best we can. More than a month ago, senators from both parties came forward to urge the Senate to take up and pass the Reauthorization, the Violence Against Women Act. The Senate heard that day from Senator Klobuchar, Senator Murkowski, Senator Murray, distinguished presiding officer Senator Hagan, Senator Shaheen, Senator Feinstein, Senator Boxer, was the author of a House bill in 1990. 8 senators came to the floor to remind us why this bill is important, why it should pass. There's nothing radical or new by saying that all victims are entitled to services. You know, I've been some of the most horrendous crime scenes you can imagine in my earlier career. I never asked, and certainly none of the police officers there ever asked, whether the victim was a Democrat or a Republican or rich or poor or from a minority. So a victim is a victim is a victim. And we should be all helping all victims, not discriminating among them. Now, we know that even though the economy is improving, we have to spend our taxpayer money responsibly. That's why in this bill, I want senators to know we consolidate 13 programs into 4 to reduce duplication and bureaucratic barriers, cut the authorization level by more than $135 million a year, decrease of 20% from the last reauthorization. We have significant accountability provisions, audit requirements, enforcement mechanisms. And I sought to consult with Senator Grassley and others on this, knowing how important these aspects are to them. And our Senate Judiciary Committee, those who opposed the bill were given an opportunity to offer a substitute and other amendments. Those were voted on. Now, in minority views, Senator Kyle noted disagreement with the provisions of the bill responding to the crisis of violence against Native women by incorporation of provision for the Save Native Women Act to provide domestic violence jurisdiction over perpetrators with significant ties to the prosecuting tribes. Opponents have noted their disagreement with the U-Visa provision requested by law enforcement. Some oppose the provisions intended to ensure against discrimination in services based on sexual orientation or gender identity. Again, I'll say what I've said over and over again. A victim is a victim is a victim. And we shouldn't ask what category they fall in. If somebody's a victim of violence against women or sexual abuse, we shouldn't ask what category they fall in. I've continued to reach out to those on the other side. If they have other amendments, let's bring them up, let's vote on them. Let's vote this up or down. Don't vote maybe. So I hope we can reach to the leadership on both sides, get a time to get this done. Don't keep holding up legislation. It's been endorsed by more than 700 state and national organizations and numerous religious and faith-based organizations and law enforcement. Let's show the Senate won't duck this issue. We'll vote for it or we'll vote against it. Because domestic and sexual violence knows no political party. Its victims are Republican and Democrat, rich and poor, young and old, male and female, gay and straight. Let's pass this without delay. It's a law that saved countless lives. It's an example of what can be done when we work together.